Good afternoon, and welcome to the sixth lesson on men and women in the Bible. Today we'll be talking about Nehemiah, King Artaxerxes, Sanbollet, and Tobiah. Ezra and Nehemiah emerged during a pivotal time in Jewish history. After decades of captivity in Babylon, they led many people back to Judah to rebuild Jerusalem and its temple, both structurally and spiritually. There is a partnership that you're going to see that grows here. And I love the way this partnership worked. Ezra was well versed in the law of Moses, which was the law of God. And Nehemiah had a tenacity to stand, work, and complete the work that he was given. There's a part for everyone in the building of God's kingdom. I encourage you to find your place and get busy. Ezra, a priest and scholar, well versed in God's law, he was a descendant of Aaron, who was the first high priest. We talked about Aaron last week. He was in charge of some of the people returning from exile. It was because of his lifestyle and him that caused some of these people that was in exile to come back. A devout man, Ezra led his people in prayer and fasting. He devoted himself to the study and observance of the law of the Lord and the teaching of its decrees and laws in Israel. The hand of God was on Ezra. So King Artaxerxes gave Ezra everything he asked for. He said anybody in his kingdom that wanted to go rebuild the wall can go with Ezra to Jerusalem. The king and his advisors gave Ezra gold for the sake of the God of Israel who dwells in Jerusalem. He was also given all the silver and gold he could obtain from the Babylon people, as well as the free will offering of the people. So the people in Babylon, the citizens of Babylon, gave him silver and gold and free will offerings to go back to help rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Ezra was instructed that with the money he was given, he was to buy bulls, rams, and male lambs. Also, take grain and drink offering to sacrifice them on the altar of the temple of God in Jerusalem. And if Ezra needed anything else, he can go get it from the royal treasury. That's favor. That's favor. For the king to give him all this, the people to give him all this, that's favor. King Artaxerxes offered more to Ezra. You can read up on it more in Ezra 7:13 through 22. It tells of all the things the king gave to Ezra. He said, whatever the God of heaven has prescribed, let it be done with diligence for the temple of the God of heaven. The king that wasn't a Jew gave and had other people to give and released other people to give. God will set you up. I don't care where you at. Then the king set order from verse 24 through 26 of chapter 7. You can see where the king, he just told how God used him to tell how things should be set up. Then they gave praise to the Lord, the God of their ancestors, because God put in the king's heart to bring honor on the house of the Lord, all because of the way Ezra honored God outwardly. The king did this, the people of Babylon helped Ezra, all because of Ezra's attitude, his outward attitude, the way he praised God, the way he worshiped God, the way he studied God's practices and stood on them. That gave him favor with the king. even though the king wasn't a Jew. Now, Ezra's role was to end the practice of Jews marrying non-Jews from neighboring countries and to return the people to God's ordained pattern of worship. Okay. Meanwhile, while Nehemiah was still living in Persia, where he served as an emperor's wine steward, Nehemiah learned of the difficulties the Jews were encountering in Jerusalem. They lived in fear of surrounding nations, those same surrounding nations that Ezra did not want them marrying into. And the protective wall around Jerusalem was in ruins. The Persian emperor granted him permission to go to Jerusalem and supervise the rebuilding of the city wall. In fact, God so stirred the emperor's heart that Nehemiah was given an escort and building materials. Sound like the same favor that was given to Ezra. I tell you, I don't care where you are or what you're doing. When God has need of you, even your enemies will have to let you go and do what God called you to do. When God have need of you, his will be done. I don't care where you at. I know sometimes we think we missed it. Oh my gosh, I'm way over here when I seem like I should be way over there. When God have need of you, he have ways of making things come together and getting you where you need to be. Trust God. Trust God. We're not that smart. Our ability isn't that good. God know we're human. He know we're gonna mess up. He know we're gonna do things we shouldn't do. But when he have need of you, he will make sure you're in the place you need to be. Now, Sanbollet, and a Samaritan leader, became very angry when he found out that Nehemiah was going to rebuild the wall. Tobiah, his sidekick, said, what they are building, even a fox climbing up on it will break their wall of stones. Tobiah is an Ammonite who attempts to hinder Nehemiah from building the wall. We all have those naysayers. We all have those people that try to stop us from doing what God called us to do. But I love the way Nehemiah did it. He didn't just ignore them, but he put prayer behind it. Nehemiah prayed that God would have their prayers, would hear their prayers and turn the insults from Tobiah and Sanballat back on their own heads. Nehemiah was able to get the wall rebuilt halfway when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, and the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem wall was going ahead and that the gaps were being closed. They were very angry. So they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem. Wrong thing to do. And stir up trouble against it. God repeatedly caused their plans to fail. Nehemiah prayed often and calmed his people's fears by organizing the workers. Half of them were fully armed and stood guard, while the other half rebuilt the wall. Even the workers had swords as they worked. They had to work and be ready to fight at a drop of a hat, just in case. Nehemiah refused to come down off the wall. He was sent to do a thing, and he did it. We have to get the mindset of Nehemiah. That God told me to do this, no matter what that person say, you say, your mother say, your brother say, you're going to do what God say, and only what God say. When the wall was finished, it was obvious to both the Israelites and their enemies that God's hand had been upon the rebuilding. The people asked Ezra to read the law to them. Then they prayed, confessed their sins and the sins of their ancestors, and signed an agreement to live in obedience to God. God's work is often coupled with danger and uncertainty. During the times of the restoration of Jerusalem, the Israelites could not rest. They had to sleep ready. They had to sleep dressed, ready to fight, ready for battle at any given moment. Their leaders had to be alert and hear from God. They had to be so close to God as if God, which He was, right there with them. And they needed to know His voice. They needed to hear His voice. And they needed to follow the instructions of His voice. Ezra and Nehemiah rose to that call and rebuilt the wall in Jerusalem. I have a couple of questions that, as I always do at the end, for the answer, put the answers in the comments. My first one is, where did Ezra teach God's laws and decrees? Number two, what role did Ezra have with the Jews and non-Jews to keep them from marrying? I about gave the answer. What were Sanbollet and Tobiah's plans? What were their plans? What did the emperor give to Nehemiah? Nehemiah, that was number 4. What did the emperor give to Nehemiah? Number 5, Nehemiah lived in Persia. What was his job there? Thank you once again for listening and coming to join me for this short teaching of different people in the Bible, just for the recognition of when you hear the names, you can go back and say, okay, Nehemiah, he helped build the wall. So you know just a little bit of what he have, or what he's done, or what he has accomplished. Because in my travels or in talking with different people, they'll ask now, who is and what did? So I'm just trying to give a little brief history or whatever on each person in the Bible, just so you can have some type of recollection or thought of who they are when you hear their names. Have a blessed Wednesday. Amen and amen.